This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this edition of CBN NewsWatch for Wednesday, June 5th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, President Donald Trump begins his commemoration of the 75th anniversary of D-Day in Britain, as he's met with protesters, but also some support in the United Kingdom. Messianic believers in Israel attacked as they are headed toward a Hebrew worship service, an example of the hostility of some Orthodox Jews against the Messianic community. As the 30th anniversary of the massacre in Tiananmen Square is observed, a warning about the potential threat to the world from China and a humanitarian crisis in Southeast Asia so big, relief groups are struggling to keep up. All those stories and much more are ahead today in this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We will begin this hour with President Donald Trump commemorating the 75th anniversary of D-Day in Portsmouth, England today. It was a key launching point for the Allied forces that landed on Normandy, and as expected, the president's visit to the United Kingdom has been met with protests, but also with some support.
No Trump! No
I think the man's a danger to the world. You know, his foreign policy, the state, his behaviour.
I see him as one of the world leaders that I can actually relate to as a working class citizen. He's a businessman himself. He knows how to be successful. He knows what he wants, and he speaks the truth.
While the London police had their hands full, the president was smoothing over his past criticism of Prime Minister Theresa May, complimenting her on her handling of Brexit.
I would have sued and settled, maybe. Perhaps you won't be given the credit that you deserve.
President Trump said Britain and the United States would be able to strike a phenomenal trade deal once the UK had left the EU. Adair Hurd is following this story for us and joins us now with more. So how would you say this trip has gone better than expected?
I think so. You look at the media coverage, it's astounding how one-sided it is, calling this a low point for the special relationship. I saw a headline, "Money can't buy you class," you know, these jabs at the president. But I actually expected more chaos than this, more tension. I have to hand it to the British. I think that they're trying to do their best to be a good host for the president, I think it's a win for the president.
So the British left, really, we know, cannot stand President Trump. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, and they have a short memory. They act like this started with Trump. They thought Ronald Reagan was a senile old man who was going to incinerate the planet. They called George Bush a war criminal, George W. Bush. And so this is nothing new. The British left is really left, and they can't stand Republican presidents. So this is really, to me, it's a non-story. But Trump's style, of course, they hate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dale, thank you so much. We'll see you in just a few minutes for some important insight into potential threat from another country. We'll be talking about China at that time.
Great.
See you in just a bit. Here in the United States, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam is calling a special session of the legislature to debate new gun control laws following the Virginia Beach shooting. Some feel it is too soon from a sensitivity standpoint, and they say Northam is trying to inflame political tension. But in his statement, the governor praised first responders and called on Virginia lawmakers to act as second responders and try to put an end to this kind of violence.
I will be asking for votes and laws, not thoughts and prayers.
The special session will convene in just 2 weeks. Republicans say while the governor can call the special session, he cannot dictate what issue is discussed, and they plan to use that time to talk about tougher sentences for those who use guns while committing crimes. The gunman in that attack Friday reportedly appeared to target supervisors in his department. That is according to a survivor of the attack and a city councilman. In a report from CNN, Virginia Beach city employees returned to work Tuesday, less than 72 hours after the shooting. Prayer gatherings remain a constant sight at the Municipal Center as many visit the makeshift memorial set up to remember the victims. The city of Virginia Beach will be honoring the 12 victims of the shooting Thursday night at a special event called VB Remembers at Rock Church in Virginia Beach. You'll be able to watch it live on the CBN News channel and at cbnnews.com. That begins at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. If you'd like to help the families of the victims of Friday's tragedy, CBN's Operation Blessing is taking donations for them. 100% of your gift will go to the families to help them in their time of devastating need. Dozens of Jewish protesters recently attacked Messianic believers headed to a Hebrew worship concert in Jerusalem. As CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell now reports, it's the latest example of hostility of certain Orthodox Jews against the Messianic community.
Inside the King of Kings congregation, an audience listened to a concert of Hebrew worship songs. But outside, something else was going on.
30 to 40 religious men had gathered, and they started harassing our people as they were trying to enter into worship, blowing whistles, trying to drown out the sound of worship. And that alerted the first wave of the SWAT team from the police that came out.
The Messianic Jewish Alliance of Israel hosted the concert at the King of Kings Community Facility, one of the largest congregations in Jerusalem for Christians and Messianic Jews. Senior Pastor Chad Holland told CBN News a mob of protesters outside the facility's lobby attacked men, women, and children trying to attend the concert.
They started by screaming, pushing. Several people were hit, some were cut in the face. They broke glass, they damaged property. They were kicking, they were hitting, they were cornering people. They pushed several up against the wall. They pushed down several women as well. They threw water bottles, they spit on a lot of people, and in the end they started spraying pepper spray.
Some of the protesters held a sign from the far-right fringe group Lehava that opposes contact with non-Jews and a Christian presence in Israel. According to Holland, police had a hard time gaining control of the protesters.
They overran the first wave of the SWAT team. They ended up leaving. Then a second wave of regular level police came with the captain, and the mob scene overran them as well with numbers. And it took several hours before the police could rally enough of the SWAT team in full armor and helmets and face shields.
While evangelicals and other Christians are welcomed as friends by most Israeli sectors, Messianic Jews who believe Jesus is the Messiah are sometimes shunned.
Even though we tried to reason with them and discuss, hey, why are you guys so angry? They said that we were traitors. They chanted several times that we worship three gods. Now, of course, if you know anything about the Messianic theology, we believe in one God. And we tried to reason with them to explain to them that they had a misunderstanding. They later on didn't take too kindly to that explanation. They began to chant that we were Nazis at that point.
Holland said they'd welcome the opportunity to explain who they are and what they believe to the protesters.
We're certainly not the enemies of anybody worshiping God, but that we are believers in Yeshua. We serve one God and we believe in the Bible. So we'd love to sit down and talk to them if they would ever have us. We thank the police again, and we covet the prayers of all the believers around the world.
Holland said in the end the protesters didn't win because the concert went on as planned. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Back here in the United States, Maine is one step closer to legalizing doctor-assisted suicide. The bill that passed the Democratic-led Senate Tuesday would allow doctors to prescribe terminally ill people a fatal dose of medication, but does not consider it suicide under state law. Critics argue that doctors can make mistakes and that bill could have unintended consequences. The bill now heads to the Democratic governor, Janet Mills, who has 10 days to act on the bill. Her office said she has not yet taken a position. Coming up, remembering the massacre at Tiananmen Square in China 30 years ago and looking ahead at the threat some warn China could pose today.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is. This is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
And welcome back to CBN News Watch. In Washington, hundreds gathered on Capitol Hill Tuesday to mark one of the darkest days in Communist China's history. Paul Strand was there covering a rally to remember the Tiananmen Square massacre from 30 years ago.
As President Nixon and the U.S. opened up China more in the 1970s and 80s, there was great hope that maybe they were going to come around. But then came the Tiananmen Square massacre, crushing the hopes of more than 1 billion people.
But before that massacre came days of tens of thousands of hopeful Chinese pushing in the square and elsewhere for more freedom and democracy. Marion Smith of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
It was a wave that was spread throughout China in the spring of '89. It's a wave that we also saw in Europe that same year. Unfortunately, in China, it was extinguished by the People's Liberation Army and the Chinese Communist Party, who were willing to murder their own citizens rather than talk about their legitimacy.
As this rally noted, a dark time followed. Reggie Littlejohn fights against the Chinese totalitarian grip on childbirth, which has led to some 400 million abortions.
At that time, at least, they could even gather on the square. Today, they don't have freedom of association, and if two people got together on the square and held up a sign, they would be immediately detained. That's how much human rights have regressed since Tiananmen Square.
Smith described what came after the massacre.
Absolute prohibition on the exercise of political freedom, free speech, religious freedom, etc. And today, under Xi Jinping, you see a hardening of that totalitarian state. He is a more dictatorial leader than any leader we've seen in China since Mao.
Many remember one man after the massacre blocking tanks with his own body. Littlejohn says such courage would get no respect today.
There was one pastor's wife in Henan province in 2016 who stood in front of a bulldozer as it was bulldozing a church. She wouldn't move, and she actually got bulldozed. She was killed, buried alive by the Chinese Communist Party.
As more Americans than ever are leaning towards socialism, there's a lesson for them in Tiananmen Square. That's the fact that no collectivist government is ever going to lead you towards more rights and more freedom. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
And Dale Hurd is back now with more on this story. So, Dale, a writer who's known as China's Solzhenitsyn has a warning. What is it?
Yeah, I just wrote about this on our website. Liao Yiwu, who's a dissident writer now in exile, is warning the world in no uncertain terms that China is the biggest threat to the world. And he explains that we basically, as was mentioned in that piece, China really hasn't changed that much, except now it's a lot richer. It has a lot more money for guns, and it has a lot more ability to threaten the rest of the world.
Yeah. Does he believe that China will ever be free?
Not as long as the West keeps enabling it. And we've seen a tougher line with Trump, but the Europeans don't want to go along with it. And it's a real, it's greed and hypocrisy. It's a double standard, and letting China get away with a lot of stuff in the name of, swinging a deal with a Chinese company. As long as that continues, this writer is saying China will not be free.
Now, I know you've reported on this as well as us, that China is developing a system called social credit. How does that work?
That's a really creepy Orwellian almost like a credit rating system, except everyone is tracked in China, which is amazing because there are so many people, and they're watched and their actions opinions they express, places they go, associations they have. It adds up to this social credit score, and if they complain about the government, they're going to have a low one, and it's just another way for the Chinese government to control people.
And we began this segment looking at the anniversary of Tiananmen Square, some 30 years. We're seeing remembrances here, but you won't find those in China, correct?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. China looks like a modern, civilized nation, but really think of China as Maoist China with a lot more money. It really is all it is.
Oh, frightening. Thank you so much. And still ahead, a humanitarian and refugee crisis in Southeast Asia that has aid groups struggling with how to cope.
Wouldn't it be great if you could just hop on a plane and fly to a third world country and hand out food and medicine to the needy? And wouldn't it be great if some of those people came to know Jesus as their Savior because of your help? And wouldn't it be great if you could help out people like this all around the world every day? Wouldn't that make you feel great? And what if you could do all of this without having to leave your home or write monthly checks? Well, you can. Partner with CBN and you can help spread the gospel all around the world and make it a better place. And when you sign up for Pledge Express, your contribution will be deducted from your bank account every month automatically. It's a safe and simple way to make a difference. Plus, wouldn't it be great to get life-changing teachings every month from Pat and Gordon? When you sign up for Pledge Express, you'll save time and money, and you won't just sit around and watch the world go by. You'll help change it for the glory of God. Now, wouldn't that be great?
When you care, souls are set free. When you give, lives are made new. When you share, eternal life begins. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
The Southeast Asian country of Bangladesh is struggling to help more than 1 million refugees who've crossed their borders. In this week's edition of World Beat, George Thomas introduces us to the plight of Myanmar's Rohingya Muslims.
Hello everyone, welcome to World Beat, where we show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it. Back in August 2017, a brutal crackdown by Myanmar's predominantly Buddhist military forced more than 1 million Rohingya Muslims to flee to neighboring Bangladesh. Human rights agencies say that thousands were killed and scores of Rohingya villages burned to the ground. United Nations investigators recommended that high-ranking members of Myanmar's military be prosecuted for genocide and crimes against humanity. The majority of Rohingya Muslims who fled the violence now live in Kutupalong, the world's biggest refugee camp located in Bangladesh. The massive scale of refugees is putting an enormous burden on Bangladesh as the country struggles to provide adequate shelter, water and basic services. My next guest spent several weeks in the Kutupalong refugee camps. Haley Sadler is an international documentary photographer focusing on human conflict and the toll it takes around the world, particularly displacement and migration. Her work has taken her to over 30 countries, including Afghanistan, Lebanon, Liberia, Nigeria, and Myanmar. Haley, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been almost 2 years since the ethnic cleansing spurred this massive displacement of Rohingya. What does the situation on the ground in the camps look like right now?
Well, George, the NGOs have stabilized the initial emergency on the ground, and I noticed a lot of infrastructure and structural improvements from when I was last there in May 2018. But it's important to remember it's an ongoing crisis. There's been no solution, no resolution, so it's imperative that the world doesn't look away.
What are some of the challenges families face living in the world's largest and most densely packed refugee camp?
So the camps are situated on a particularly environmentally fragile part of Bangladesh, so they face risks from cyclones, monsoons, multiple natural disasters on top of the logistical challenges of living in this incredibly overcrowded, tightly packed camp, where there are limited resources, limited mobility, and all the challenges that come with that. But at the end of the day, what's not complex is the suffering that's happening right now in these refugee camps with these people. They're estimated to be the most persecuted minority group in the entire world, and facing with so much strength and so much resilience, but dealing with issues and environments that no human being should be asked to deal with or asked to face.
You saw that, as I mentioned, firsthand. More than half of those living in the camps are women or girls. How are they impacted by the living conditions?
Yeah, so it's already very vulnerable population, but then women and girls specifically are an incredibly vulnerable population within that subset. And so they face increased challenges of, hygiene challenges, domestic violence, trafficking risks. A lot of them may not feel comfortable wandering around in the camps alone, and so they stay within their shelters. And during this time especially, it's very hot there. So the stifling environment of sitting inside that shelter in the dark, it's just another challenge they face on top of everything they've already been through.
Bangladesh wants to send these refugees back. What does the future look like for these families?
Right now, it's uncertain. There's no true time frame. They really cannot be expected to return to their homes until tangible, substantial steps have been taken to guarantee their citizenship, guarantee their rights, guarantee their safety. There's not been enough evidence so far for them to return and to feel comfortable returning. So right now, their future is uncertain. They're truly stuck on these camps without a path to a certain future.
You've been to some 30 countries. Haley, how would you rate this compared to your other assignments? What was it like for you personally?
Yeah, it's hard to compare human suffering. It always impacts you. It's always difficult to see and difficult to experience that through someone else's experiences. But Bangladesh, the situation in the refugee camps there is particularly difficult. These families have been through, an ethnic cleansing, a genocide. Every single family on the camps has lost something or lost someone. And so that trauma of what they have been through is palpable as you're walking through the camps and as you're interacting with the families. And so to me, it's definitely one of the most difficult environments that I have seen, families being forced to survive in. But what you always come away with is the incredible people that you meet, their strength, their hope in the face of everything that they have been through. I think that's what you cling to, and that's what sticks in your memory even as you come back home and go on to the next assignment.
What can people here in America do to help?
I particularly like the smaller organizations that I think are making an outsized impact on the ground. Books Unbound is one that I worked with, which is providing Rohingya-specific education materials on the camp. So find an issue that you care about, find an organization that's meeting that need, and then become involved, become invested with them.
Haley, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, George.
You're most welcome. Well, folks, that is it for today's edition of World Beat. Until next time, goodbye and God bless you. Now, back to NewsWatch.
And coming up here on NewsWatch, we're checking in with our Studio 5 program to meet the man behind the gospel project that is on the top of the charts. We've got to look at that conversation when we come back.
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
He's the voice behind the Gospel Project at the top of the Billboard charts, and he is in Studio 5 to talk about his first solo effort. A round of applause for Titus Showers, striking out on a solo career and scoring the #1 spot on the Billboard charts.
Whatever I need, He will supply, as long as I ask.
He brings his latest song and story to Studio 5.
It was a test of our faith because that was my mom.
Titus Showers sits down for an interview, and he's performing on this latest edition of Studio 5. You can watch the full show on the news channel at 9:30 Eastern. We'll also have new music from Kirk Franklin and go behind the scenes of The Secret Life of Pets 2. That's all tonight at 9:30. Time now for your Wednesday word, and today's word is laugh. When is the last time you've had a good one? Even if it's only been a minute, it is too long. Scripture says, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones." So wake up those dry bones and make time to laugh today. After all, it is a biblical duty to do so. With that word, I encourage you to make today a wonderful Wednesday and a wonderful rest of the week. That will do it for this first edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can find more on the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. You can also watch CBN News programs anytime on the CBN News channel. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can do that by emailing us. The address is newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Goodbye, and God bless.